I still remember the sound of her shoes on the wooden floor that morning. Soft, hurried steps, almost trembling. When I turned around, I saw my daughter-in-law, Emily, standing in the doorway with my suitcases beside her. The sunlight behind her made it hard for me to read her expression, but her voice told me everything. "Mom. I think it's time you moved out," she whispered. For a moment, I felt the room grow still, like the air itself had stopped breathing. Those were words I never expected to hear in my own home. Not after everything we had shared. Not after all the years I had silently held this family together. Not after welcoming her into this house with my whole heart. But instead of crying, I smiled. A small, tired smile. The kind a person wears when they have finally run out of tears, or maybe when they see a truth they have been avoiding for far too long. "Did you ask the owner of the house for permission?" I asked gently. She blinked, confused. My name, Mary Thompson, was still on the deed. This house was mine. But I was not angry. Just deeply, quietly hurt. Emily looked down, unable to meet my eyes. And in that moment, I realized that this story, our story, did not begin with anger. It began with love, loss, and misunderstandings that slowly grew into walls none of us knew how to break. I did not know then that her request would uncover a truth I had been blind to. I did not know it would change my relationship with my son, Daniel. I did not know it would open doors I had kept shut for years. But most of all, I did not know it would lead me to the one secret Emily had been hiding all along. I should start at the beginning, years before the suitcases, years before Emily became part of our family. Back when this house felt full, alive, and whole. My husband, Michael, built it with his own hands. Every nail, every board, every quiet evening spent planning the next step. He used to say the house would protect us long after he was gone. At the time, I would laugh and tell him not to speak like that. But now, sometimes his words echo through the halls. We raised our son, Daniel, here. He was always gentle, always careful with his words, always watching the world with thoughtful eyes. Daniel never liked conflict. Even as a child, he would step between arguments and offer peace like it was something he carried in his pocket. When he met Emily in college, he brought her home the first Thanksgiving. She walked into my kitchen with a shy smile and a store-bought pie she apologized for a dozen times. "I'm not much of a baker," she said, cheeks red. I remember laughing, telling her that love was the only ingredient that mattered. She seemed relieved, almost grateful for the warmth. Those early years were sweet. Emily helped me in the garden. Daniel would fix things around the house with that gentle patience he had inherited from his father. We spent Sunday mornings drinking coffee on the porch, admiring the maple tree Michael had planted long ago. But life has a way of changing quietly, so quietly you barely notice the shift until you find yourself standing in a different world. When Michael passed away from heart failure, the silence in the house grew heavy. I tried to stay strong for Daniel, but inside, everything felt fragile. The room seemed too big. The nights seemed too long. Daniel and Emily moved back in with me shortly after the funeral. They said it was to keep me company, to look after me. And I believed them. I was grateful, truly grateful, to have someone else breathing under the same roof. But grief is complicated. It changes how people speak, how they move, how they look at one another. And I think, without realizing it, the weight of my sadness began to press on them. At first, Emily would knock softly before entering my room, checking if I needed tea or help with chores. She would cook dinner and insist I sit while she worked. Daniel would hug me a little too tightly, like he was afraid I would slip through his fingers. But as months passed, the tenderness slowly shifted into something else. A pause in Emily's voice. A sigh Daniel tried to hide. Quiet looks exchanged between them when they thought I wasn't watching. I told myself it was nothing. Just the natural adjustment of three adults living together. But the walls of a house hold more than memories, they hold tensions, too. They collect them, layer them, store them in the silence between footsteps. Still, I pushed the worry aside. I wanted harmony. I wanted peace. I wanted to believe the house Michael built would never become a place of quiet resentment. What I didn't see, what I refused to see, was that Emily was carrying a burden she never spoke of. A fear that made her restless. A secret she thought she had to protect alone. And that secret would soon change everything. The first signs of change were small. Almost invisible. Like tiny cracks in a window that you only notice when the light hits them just right. Emily had always been soft-spoken, gentle, a little shy. But she began moving through the house with a quiet tension in her shoulders. Her smiles were shorter. Her footsteps quicker. She kept glancing at the door as if waiting for something, or someone. One evening, when I walked into the kitchen, I found her staring at a bill, her fingers trembling slightly as she held it. She folded it quickly when she saw me. "Oh, Mary," she said, forcing a smile. "I was just finishing some paperwork." I nodded, trying to keep my voice warm. "Do you need help with anything?" "No, no. It's fine." But her eyes told a different story. They darted away, avoiding mine. Later that night, I lay awake thinking about her trembling hands. I wondered if she and Daniel were struggling financially, or if something was wrong at her job as a dental assistant. But Daniel didn't mention anything, and I didn't want to intrude. Still, the seed of worry had been planted. As weeks went by, little moments added to the unease. I would walk into the living room and find Emily quickly closing her laptop. I would reach for the mail and notice envelopes with her name only, tucked away before I could see them. Daniel began working late more often, not with excitement, but with the kind of exhaustion that made him rub his eyes in silence at the dinner table. One afternoon, I heard their voices behind their bedroom door. Not loud, but strained. Daniel's voice: "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Emily's: "I didn't want to worry you. I thought I could fix it." Silence followed, thick and heavy. I stood in the hallway, my heart tightening. I wanted to knock, to ask if everything was all right, but I froze. Maybe I shouldn't have been listening. Maybe it wasn't my place. Still, the worry lingered like fog. The shift in our home became more obvious as the holidays approached. Emily began avoiding me not out of anger, but something else. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. When I entered a room, she would suddenly busy herself with chores or pretend to look for something in her bag. The warmth she once brought into the kitchen felt replaced by cold drafts of uneasiness. Daniel tried to keep everything normal. He would ask about my day, help me with groceries, tell me stories about his coworkers. But I could see the way his eyes flicked toward Emily every time she grew quiet. He was worried too. One chilly Wednesday morning, I noticed Emily packing boxes in the guest room. "Are you two planning something?" I asked with a smile. She hesitated. "Just organizing. The room is cluttered." But it wasn't cluttered. I kept that room tidy. I could see she wasn't rearranging, she was preparing. And the fear inside me grew stronger. Then came the conversation that changed the rhythm of the house. Emily and Daniel sat together at the dining table. She kept her hands folded tightly, like she was holding herself together. "Mom," Daniel began, his voice gentle, "we've been thinking about making some changes." My heart dropped. Not because I expected bad news, but because their faces looked too serious for anything simple. Emily swallowed. We think you deserve more space. More peace. Maybe a place of your own where you won't have to deal with our schedules and noise." I stared at them, unsure how to respond. This house was my life. My memories. My history with Michael. And they were asking me to consider leaving it. But I also felt their discomfort. Their weight. Their fear that they were disturbing me, or maybe failing me. I took a breath. If that's what you feel is best, we can talk about it. But deep inside, something cracked. Daniel reached for my hand. We love you, Mom. We just want what's best for everyone. Emily nodded, but her eyes glistened with unshed tears. She didn't speak a word. After that day, everything felt different. Emily avoided common spaces. Daniel stayed late at work to escape tension he didn't know how to mend. And I began to wonder if my presence had become a burden. One evening, while cleaning the living room, I found Emily's phone buzzing on the couch. A notification lit up the screen. A message preview. We need your payment by the 15th. No exceptions. My breath caught. Payment? For what? Before I could read more, Emily rushed in, grabbed the phone, and forced a smile. Sorry. I left it here, she said too quickly. But her hands were shaking again. That night, as I folded laundry, Daniel approached me quietly. Mom, he said, voice soft, Emily's been overwhelmed. She's dealing with something, but she doesn't want to worry you. What kind of something? I asked gently. He hesitated. I don't know all the details. But it's serious. There it was, the truth, or at least part of it. Something serious enough to make Emily hide bills, messages, and whispered conversations. Something serious enough to make her feel unsafe in the home I tried to keep warm. I realized then that the distance between us wasn't personal. It was fear. She was drowning in something she didn't know how to say out loud. And Daniel, caught between us, didn't know how to help her without hurting me. The tension continued to grow, soft but constant. Like rain tapping against a window that never stops, never intensifies, but never really fades either. I knew we were heading toward a breaking point. I just didn't know how close it was. And then, one Saturday morning, it happened. I woke to the sound of movement downstairs. Suitcases. Soft thuds. The rustling of clothes being folded quickly, urgently. When I walked into the living room, I saw Emily standing beside two of my suitcases, packed. Her face was pale. Her hands were nervously twisting a sleeve of her sweater. Mary, she whispered, I think it's time for you to find another place to live. It felt like the floor gave way beneath me. Not because she said the words, but because of the fear behind them. Fear that told me this wasn't about me at all. But I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I didn't demand an explanation. Instead, I smiled. A soft, sad smile. And then I spoke the line that would stop her heart for a moment. Did you ask the owner of the house for permission? Emily froze. Daniel, who had just walked in, stared at her in shock. And in that silence, that deep, painful silence, I finally realized the truth. Emily wasn't trying to push me out of my home. She was trying to protect me from something she didn't know how to face. Emily's face went pale when she heard my words. Her fingers loosened around the handle of the suitcase, and it tipped slightly, leaning toward her like even the luggage understood the weight of the moment. Daniel stepped forward, his eyes wide, his voice low. Emily, what are you doing? But Emily didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at me almost as if she were seeing me for the first time. Not as an obstacle. Not as an older woman lingering in her home. But as a person. A mother. Someone she had once trusted. Her lips trembled. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then whispered, I didn't mean. I didn't want it to be like this. I walked slowly toward her. My heart was beating hard, but my voice stayed calm, gentle, because something inside me, something instinctive, knew this moment wasn't about being offended. It was about understanding. "Emily," I said softly, "tell me what's going on." Her tears fell before her words did. Daniel placed his hand on her shoulder, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emily, please. We're all here. Just talk to us." She sank onto the couch, covering her face with her hands. I sat beside her, leaving a little space, not wanting to overwhelm her. Daniel sat on her other side. For a long moment, she could only cry. Soft, broken sounds that felt like the release of months, maybe even years, of fear. Finally, with a shaky breath, she spoke. "Mary, they're trying to take everything from me." I blinked, unsure what she meant. "Who is?" She hesitated, searching for strength. "Debt collectors." The room grew still. Even the clock on the wall seemed to pause between ticks. Daniel's head turned sharply toward her. "You told me it wasn't that serious." She shook her head. "I didn't want to scare you. I thought I could fix it before you found out." Her voice cracked, and she pulled a folded paper from her sweater, crumpled from being held too tightly for too long. She handed it to me with trembling fingers. It was a notice. Not just for late payment, but for possible legal action and wage garnishment. The amount owed was high. Too high for a young couple just starting out. I took a slow breath. "Emily, why didn't you tell us sooner?" She wiped her eyes. "Because after your husband passed, you were already hurting. And Daniel was grieving too. I felt like I couldn't bring more sadness into this house." Her words broke something inside me. All this time, I thought she was avoiding me, disliking me, pushing me away. But she was drowning quietly, afraid to let her fears spill into a home already filled with grief. I kept getting deeper into it, she continued. Medical bills, student loans, and then some bad decisions because I panicked. I didn't want you to know how bad it was. She clasped her hands tightly. And when the letters started coming more often, when the calls didn't stop, I thought if you moved out, they wouldn't come to the house anymore. I thought I was protecting you. Daniel exhaled shakily. "Emily, why didn't you tell me you were being threatened?" She turned to him with tear-filled eyes. "Because I was ashamed. I didn't want you to think you married someone who couldn't manage her own life." Her voice quieted. "I didn't want to be a burden." For a few seconds, none of us spoke. The sunlight coming through the curtains softened the room, making everything feel fragile but honest. Then I placed my hand gently over hers. "I never wanted you to protect me from your struggles," I said. "I wanted to be part of your life, the whole of it. Not just the parts that look easy." Emily looked at me as if those words unlocked something inside her. A door she had kept shut out of fear. Daniel leaned forward, voice steady. "We will figure this out. Together." Emily let out a sob and collapsed into his arms. But the moment of truth wasn't finished. There was more, another piece of the story she had kept hidden. When she finally sat up, wiping her cheeks, she said in a whisper, "There's something else." Daniel frowned. "What is it?" She took a long breath, bracing herself. "They came to my workplace." My heart clenched. "Collectors came to your job?" She nodded. "They spoke to the receptionist. They threatened to report me. I thought I could lose my job." Daniel's face paled. "Emily. That's why I started packing your things," she said softly, turning to me. "I thought, if you weren't here, then maybe they wouldn't harass the house. Maybe I could control the damage. Maybe I could spare you." I felt my throat tighten with emotion. All this time, I had mistaken her fear for rejection. Her silence for coldness. her distance for resentment. But she was simply trying to protect the only family she had left. And in her panic, she made the wrong choice. But her heart had been trying to do the right thing. "Emily," I whispered, "this house has faced pain before. It survived my grief. It can survive yours too. You don't have to face this alone." The dam finally broke, and she cried openly, clinging to my hands. "I'm so sorry," she repeated, voice shaking. "I'm so sorry, Mary." I pressed my forehead gently against hers, the way I used to comfort Daniel when he was young. "You don't need to apologize for being afraid. Fear makes all of us do things we regret." Daniel's eyes glistened as he watched us. "We're a family," he said softly. "Families don't run from each other." For the first time in months, Emily breathed, truly breathed. Her shoulders relaxed. Her body softened. Her guard finally lowered. After the truth came out, the house felt different, lighter, as if the walls themselves had been waiting for the honesty that now filled the room. We talked for hours. About the debt. About options. About plans. About healing. Emily admitted how long she had been hiding, how terrified she was of losing everything, how ashamed she felt. Daniel held her hand the entire time, listening, comforting, finally understanding the silence that had been surrounding them. When the sun began to set, casting warm gold across the floor, I gently touched the suitcases still sitting by the door. "Let's put these away," I said quietly. "Nobody is going anywhere." Emily's tears returned, not of fear this time, but relief. Daniel took one suitcase. I took the other. Emily watched us with trembling gratitude. As we carried them back upstairs, she followed behind me. "Mary," she said softly, "I never meant to hurt you." I turned, smiling gently. "I know. And we will fix this. All of it." Her eyes softened, and for the first time in a long while, I saw the same young woman who once walked into my kitchen holding a store-bought pie, embarrassed but hopeful. We were a family again. Not perfect. Not without problems. But united. The turning point had come not through anger or accusations, but through truth, tears, and the quiet strength of understanding. And little did we know. Our journey was not finished yet. The resolution, the healing, was just beginning. The next morning, the house felt different. Not healed yet. But quieter. Softer. As if every room had taken a deep breath overnight. I woke early, as I always did, and made coffee in the kitchen. The sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, warm and gentle, landing across the old wooden table where Michael used to read his newspaper. For the first time in months, I didn't feel that familiar heaviness in my chest. I set 3 mugs on the table. One for me. One for Daniel. One for Emily. It felt symbolic, like laying out a small offering of peace. Emily came downstairs slowly, her steps hesitant. Her eyes were still swollen from crying the day before, but her expression was softer, calmer. "Good morning, Mary," she whispered, almost as if she wasn't sure she deserved to speak. I smiled warmly. "Good morning, sweetheart. Sit down. I made your favorite blend." She looked surprised, touched. She sat, wrapping both hands around the warm mug. "Thank you, for everything. For yesterday. For not turning away from me." "Your family," I said gently. "We don't turn away from each other, even when we stumble." A moment later Daniel joined us, and the 3 of us sat quietly, sipping coffee as the house slowly filled with morning light. It was simple. Peaceful. Something we hadn't shared in a long time. After breakfast, we spread all the documents, letters, and papers across the table. Bills, notices, payment schedules, everything Emily had been afraid to show us. Her hands shook as she set each paper down, but her voice remained steady. She was tired of carrying the weight alone. Daniel leaned forward, scanning through the numbers, the deadlines, the warnings. I watched his expression shift, not with anger, but with determination. "Okay," he said finally, exhaling. "This is a lot. But it's not hopeless." Emily's eyes filled with tears again, but this time she didn't try to hide them. "You really think we can fix this?" "I know we can," he said. "But we have to do it together." I nodded. "And we will." We spent hours creating a plan. A real, practical plan. Call the agencies. Request new payment arrangements. Look into consolidating the debt. Split responsibilities so no one felt overwhelmed. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. But it was honest. And for the first time in months, Emily wasn't flinching at every phone notification. She wasn't shrinking at every envelope with a bold red stamp. She wasn't walking through the house like a guest, afraid to disturb anything. She was present. She was open. She was healing. Later that afternoon, as Emily prepared lunch, she stopped suddenly and turned to me. "Mary, can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Of course." She hesitated. "Did you hate me, even a little, yesterday?" The question pierced me softly. I set my tea down and walked over to her. "No," I said gently. "I didn't hate you. I was hurt, yes. Confused. Worried. But never hate." Her eyes filled with emotion. "I thought you'd see me as the girl who tried to throw you out of your own home." I reached out, brushing a tear from her cheek with the same care I once used for Daniel when he was small. What I saw was someone drowning who didn't know how to call for help. Her shoulders relaxed as she let out a trembling breath. "I'm so sorry," she whispered again. "You're forgiven," I said softly. "Truly." And she leaned forward, resting her forehead against my shoulder in a gesture so raw, so earnest, that I felt something inside me mend. Over the next weeks, our home slowly pieced itself back together, not through grand gestures, but through small, meaningful moments. Daniel fixed the creaky stair that had annoyed us for years. Emily began leaving little notes on the fridge: "Dinner at 7, I'll be late from work, thank you for today." I returned to tending the garden, and Emily joined me every Saturday morning. We planted new flowers, yellow ones she loved, blue ones that reminded me of Michael. The silence in the house changed, too. It was no longer sharp, tense, or heavy. It was peaceful. Comfortable. Like three hearts breathing in the same rhythm again. One evening, about a month after everything came to light, Emily came to my room with a folded envelope in her hand. "I want you to see something," she said softly. Inside was a new agreement from the debt agency. Lower payments. No legal threats. Manageable steps toward stability. "They approved it," she said, a smile trembling on her lips. "We can do this now. For real." I hugged her tightly, proud of her courage, proud of her honesty, proud of her resilience. "You see," I whispered. "You were never alone." She pulled back, wiping her eyes but smiling. "I thought I had to be strong alone. But I was wrong. I'm stronger with you and Daniel." Her words warmed my heart. "We all are," I told her. Then came a moment I never expected. One Sunday evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, Daniel placed a folder on the table. "Mom," he said gently. "We've been talking." I looked up, waiting. "We want you to stay here," he said. "Not just for now. Not because you need help. But because this is your home. And it always will be." Emily stepped beside him, nodding. "You're part of our life. We don't want you anywhere else." My heart swelled, And tears rose to my eyes, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. But what Daniel said next made those tears fall. "I want our future children to grow up with you here. I want them to know the woman who held this family together." Emily placed her hand over mine. "I want that too." I covered my mouth, shaking with emotion. For so long, I feared I was becoming a burden. But now, standing there with their hands holding mine, I realized something powerful. I was not someone they wanted to escape. I was someone they wanted to keep close. The house Michael built had seen grief. It had seen fear. It had seen misunderstandings and silence. But now, it saw healing. It saw family. It saw hope. In the quiet evenings filled with soft laughter, in shared meals, in the way Emily now touched my arm gently when passing me in the kitchen, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging. Our story wasn't perfect. Our bond had been tested. But it had survived. And that survival made it stronger. Little did we know, the journey was leading us toward one final moment, one final reflection that would bring everything full circle. The seasons changed as softly as our home did. Spring arrived early that year. The air grew warmer. The flowers in the garden, those Emily and I planted together, began to bloom with surprising strength, as if they too had survived a quiet winter of fear and were now reaching toward the sun. One morning, I stood by the kitchen window, watching the petals flutter in the breeze. I heard footsteps behind me, Emily's soft ones, and she wrapped her arms around me from the side. "They're beautiful," she whispered. I nodded. "Things grow better when someone cares for them." She smiled at that, understanding the deeper meaning beneath my words. Our relationship had grown the same way, not through perfection, but through patience, forgiveness, and honesty that took time to bloom. Daniel joined us moments later, placing a hand on each of our shoulders. "Breakfast is ready," he said. "And the pancakes might actually be good today." Emily laughed. "He burned the first 2 batches." I turned to them, looking at the young couple. They had become stronger, more connected, more open with one another, and my heart warmed. All the fears I once carried about being a burden, about being unwanted, about losing my place in this home, they melted away quietly, like frost fading under morning light. Later that day, as we sat on the porch together, Emily said something I will hold in my heart forever. "Mary, thank you for not giving up on me." I shook my head softly. "I never would have. Families don't give up on each other. Even when they're scared. Even when they make mistakes." She nodded slowly, her eyes gentle. "I thought strength meant hiding my problems. But now I know strength is sharing them with the people who love you." Daniel took her hand. "We're stronger together." I looked out at the garden, remembering Michael's quiet promise that this house would protect us long after he was gone. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. But now I did. A house isn't just walls and floors. It's the love inside it. The forgiveness whispered in its rooms. The courage to stay, even when it would be easier to walk away. This home had sheltered grief, fear, misunderstanding. But it also sheltered healing. And in that healing, we found one another again. As the sun set that evening, casting warm gold across the porch, I closed my eyes and let the moment settle into my heart. If life had taught me anything, it was this. Families stay whole not because they avoid cracks, but because they choose to mend them together. And sometimes, the hardest conversations, the most painful admissions, the most fragile truths, are the ones that bring us back to each other. I opened my eyes, watching Daniel and Emily laugh softly beside me, and I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. Home. With them. With love that had survived the storm. And with the quiet, steady hope of a new beginning.